it's interesting you've touched on Expo 88 there, Malcolm, and Southbank Corporation evolved as part of the successful hosting of that Expo, as part of CESPRA, the Brisbane Exposition and Southbank Redevelopment Authority. Can you now tell us a bit about the early origins of Southbank Corporation and the selection of the successful master plan, which was in itself not without significant public input and debate?
Yes, look, John, it's a long history, and someone's going to have to write a book about it one day, and I think you'd be a good author for it. But I think,
thank you.
If I could go back to the origins of the decision for Brisbane's bid to host Expo 88, I think it was always recognised that in opting for the category of Expo that it did, that in choosing a site, that Expo 88, if it was to occur in Brisbane, would be this catalyst for urban renewal of a part of Brisbane which was pretty blighted, which was a pretty sad part of Brisbane. It got quite run down, it was flood prone, it had a lot of problems associated with it. So I think the first inspired decision and the foresight someone had at that time to not only just bid for Expo, but to see Expo as a category 2, I think it was called, John, you might correct me, but a category of Expo, which, like Vancouver, was going to go on and actually result post-Expo in the redevelopment of a strategically located site. And look, that's the beginning of, I guess, a decision and a recognition by government at that point that post-Expo, the decision was taken not to hand the responsibility for post-Expo redevelopment to the City Council, but rather to a dedicated special purpose authority which had planning powers, which actually owned the land, and which could actually offer some greater certainty, particularly to the private sector who were going to be invited to develop the post-Expo site, that it was an area worthy of investing in, because there could be clarity around the long-term planning intentions for the site. So in 1989, Southbank Corporation was formed as a statutory authority, a special purpose planning body to redevelop and manage the development of the post-Expo site. And those early days were challenging days, because one of the outcomes of Expo 88 was that it was so popular and it was embraced by the people of Brisbane and certainly Australia as one of the best expos ever conducted. 16 million plus people over those 6 months, broke all expectations about attendance. But what people remembered most were the experiences that they'd had on the Expo site, particularly being exposed to the opportunities created to a riverside park, or certainly a comprehensive new piece of public space right on the river. And it was those qualities that people who came to Expo wanted to see continued through the master planning of the post-Expo site. The original intent of the government was that they had to make some money to pay for Expo, so they were going to try and maximise the kind of profits and return they could make from building development on the site. The people of Brisbane rose up and said, no, hang on, we want this site, or a large part of it, to be protected for parkland and for public open space. We reject those ideas, and we would prefer to have a less ambitious scheme in terms of particularly the number of buildings in it, and more focus on creating human-scale buildings with a high ratio of public space. So in a sense, it was people power that dictated, if you like, the current form of Expo. The other critical decision point or milestone was that the master plan, which was adopted in the early days, was contemplated a scheme which essentially would put all people one level above natural ground level and put cars below in a sort of grade separated solution. Fortunately, in 1997, a new board came in, appointed by the Premier of the state, and they were horrified, I guess, at the prospect of people being separated from the ground and not being connected back to of existing area around it, which was a very rich and very interesting part of Brisbane. And they made a very brave and courageous decision that they threw out the 1992 master plan, if I could call it that, brought in top advisors to determine a new master plan, which we refer to as the 1997 master plan, which had some 3 or 4, probably half a dozen, deceptively simple but very powerful master planning principles related to connectivity, related to proximity to river access and connectivity to the river, about creating a very clear urban structure. But the fundamental decision was that we need to bring people back to the ground, where they could relate to the existing street system and where people could feel that they could walk around it and navigate and use the precinct in a much easier way. So much of what we have achieved today, sitting here in 2010, has been due to real clarity, applying sound urban design principles to a master plan, which today continue to help guide us in our decisions around the future physical development of the precinct.
That's very interesting. And what are some of the challenges for the corporation today, now nearly 25 years since the hosting of Expo?
Well, the early days of Southbank were challenging days also, because many people doubted that the sort of vision the corporation had for the way Southbank could be developed was actually going to be possible, let alone needed. I think Brisbane at that stage was seen very much as a third-tier city in Australia, trying to compete with the other 2 big cities on the East Coast, Sydney and Melbourne. Fast forward to today, where in 2010 Brisbane now is very much setting its own course for itself, its own destiny as a city, not looking over its shoulder anymore at Sydney or Melbourne, but deciding that in terms of particularly the Pacific Rim, particularly in terms of our relationship to Asia, we can be a third and very distinctive city with our own strong economic drivers and our own distinct identity. So Southbank today is very much associated with, I guess, the very optimistic and I think strong and compelling view Brisbane has of itself, about its ability to be a different type of city by virtue of its qualities, particularly in terms of its quality of life offering, in terms of access to public open space, access to cultural facilities, and the things that are important to cities who are globally competitive with each other. So the challenges we have now are related also to the way Brisbane itself is being made over, and Brisbane is transforming itself into a world city, a city of stature, by being able to cope with significant changes to the density of population that we have. Brisbane is literally transforming itself from being one of the lowest density cities in the world. Let's think of Los Angeles, for example, very car-dominated, very sprawl-based city, to a city that actually recognises that it can't keep consuming land or committing people to long travel times and traffic congestion with all its attendant problems, but a city that's interested in actually making its inner city and the existing urban footprint very much denser, more interesting, less like a poached egg, if I could call it that, and more like an omelette, where we have things mixed up a bit more, okay? Southbank finds itself right at the epicentre of this massive change that's sort of sweeping through the city in terms of this transformation, this retrofitting, if you like, of the city. And so our big challenges are to continue to be that green place, a place that's not just about public space. It also has, supporting the public space, lots of other interesting activities: students, museums, colleges of art, shops, libraries. I could go on and describe all the different mix of uses that we have, but today it's the way those uses are coming together, the way we're creating a part of the city which is attractive not only during the week and weekends, but also day and night. Thinking about the night economy, particularly the precinct, has been quite important for us. So we find ourselves at a very dynamic point, a point where the critical mass of both people and activities, as I said earlier, is now apparent, and where we can really work to make sure that we can continue to challenge any preconceptions people have about the precinct itself.